Hello, today is Friday, August 27th, 2021. I'm Joe Schmidt from TC2, and this is Staying Connected. At the beginning of this year, my LB3 colleague, Kevin DiLallo, and I recorded a couple of podcasts that took a look at what 5G wireless service could deliver to consumers and enterprises. Shortly after, the Federal Communications Commission announced the winners of the C-band spectrum auction, which is what carriers need to provide the 5G services we discussed. AT&T and Verizon Wireless were the big winners of those auctions, and together spent almost $70 billion on the frequencies, plus billions more on related costs. T-Mobile, the current leader in 5G, was a distant third in the bidding, committing just over $9 billion. Apparently, T-Mobile's strategy was to stay in the contest long enough to drive up the price for its two larger competitors and then get out. And the strategy worked, and I'm sure the U.S. Treasury is smiling in appreciation. Let's take a closer look at what this all means. I'm again joined by Kevin, and Kevin is still a partner at LB3. Hello, Kevin. Let's take a look at what 5G is doing here, and I guess it is, in fact, moving forward in the good old US of A.
Hey, Joe, it is, finally. But the 280 megahertz of C-band spectrum the FCC awarded this winter will be made available on a staggered basis. The U.S. is a bit late to the party. Leading 5G countries in Europe and Asia, as well as Australia, made C-band available for 5G a few years ago. C-band, which is sometimes known as mid-band, refers generally to the frequencies between 4 gigahertz and 8 gigahertz, but more specifically means the narrower slice between 3.7 gig and 4.2 gig, which is currently used by satellites.
That C-band, that's the beachfront property of spectrum, right?
Yeah, it is. It's ideal for 5G because it is of high enough frequency to provide for relatively large dedicated 50 megahertz slices that carriers need to provide true 5G performance, but it's also of low enough frequency that it has decent propagation, or in layman's terms, coverage or range and ability to penetrate obstacles like buildings. The higher the frequency, the greater the capacity or bandwidth. But the poorer the propagation, which means the greater cell site density carriers will need, increasing deployment costs. Some analysts have described C-band as the perfect compromise between radio frequency or RF coverage and RF bandwidth. Until now, AT&T and Verizon Wireless haven't had the spectrum they needed to provide a form of 5G service that outperforms their advanced 4G services on a large scale. True 5G, according to the ITU's definition, requires at least 100 megahertz of spectrum, which is generally available only in mid-band and millimeter wave frequencies. But the latter have propagation deficiencies compared with lower frequencies, and so they require greater cell site density.
Hey, Kevin, as you know, I live in downtown Chicago. Will I be one of the first to have access to that C-band 5G service?
You will. Most of the C-band frequencies that AT&T and Verizon Wireless recently won will be available in 46 partial economic areas, or PEAs, which means metro markets, by the end of the year, including Chicago, which will enable the carriers to bring true 5G service to about 60% of the U.S. population, or roughly 100 million people. The spectrum needed to serve the rest of the country, including a few very large PEAs, will not be released until the end of 2023. These larger markets include the Washington, D.C., Denver, and Atlanta metro areas. By 2024, Verizon Wireless will have enough C-band spectrum to provide its 5G ultra-wideband service to 250 million people in the U.S. This is exactly the shot in the arm that major 5G providers, especially Verizon Wireless and AT&T, needed, and it will benefit commercial and consumer customers in several ways. The use of 5G for fixed wireless applications, edge computing, and Internet of Things, or IoT, use cases is going to explode. Verizon Wireless, for example, plans to offer fixed 5G business internet service, as well as 5G home internet in its C-band markets. It's also announced plans to leverage its new C-band spectrum to expand its public and private mobile edge computing, or MEC, offerings, for which it partners with AWS on public MEC and Microsoft on private MEC. We've been saying all along that the real promise of 5G for enterprise customers is not faster mobile data service, but more ubiquitous, cheaper edge computing, private 5G networks, and IoT applications that will drive innovation. And in each of these cases, it's niche players rather than the major wireless carriers who are currently out in front.
As we highlighted in one of those earlier podcasts, today 5G, it really doesn't do too much for consumers using a 5G capable smartphone. It really comes down to that bigger bandwidth and more reliable service means killer mobile apps that need 5G.
Yeah, that's right. In terms of mobile applications, the word on the street is that Verizon Wireless will only offer C-band ultra-wideband 5G, that is, the faster of its two 5G offerings, to premium customers or in connection with premium plans. The rest of us will have to settle for the slower nationwide 5G service. Verizon's current ultra-wideband services provided over millimeter wave spectrum requires line of sight and thus is available only in portions of about 60 cities. The base upcharge to add 5G to existing 4G plans is currently $10 a month, but analysts admit to not being able to predict yet how the deployment of new C-band spectrum will affect rate plans. If we had to guess, we would bet they will be significantly higher than 4G rate plans just to recoup the huge costs of building 5G networks. It's unlikely that Verizon Wireless or AT&T will offer unthrottled, unlimited data plans on true 5G because the potential for abuse with 5G is so great. We see T-Mobile as the only major carrier who will be willing to risk offering unlimited 5G plans. They've always been way out in front of the pack in terms of bleeding-edge pricing. In fact, in consumer mobile services, T-Mobile is consistently rated the best overall domestic wireless carrier, and it has a 12 to 18-month lead over AT&T and Verizon Wireless in 5G. Just last month, that is July 2021, 3 separate ratings organizations ranked T-Mobile's 5G network as having the greatest coverage and being the fastest and most reliable. Still, Verizon Wireless's and AT&T's C-band acquisitions could position them to surge past T-Mobile in mobile 5G services by 2024, given that their services will operate in the same band, albeit a different band than T-Mobile's offerings. The superior propagation of C-band frequencies should reduce anticipated deployment costs and deployment time, meaning no need to build as many new sites for the two providers. But a 12 to 18-month lead for T-Mobile in consumer services will be difficult to overcome.
So what's your thought about the enterprise market? Is there anything interesting happening there?
Joe, the enterprise market is a different story where T-Mobile is a distant third with only a 9% share. Industry observers predict that its 5G service will flop if it can't get its share of the enterprise market up. See, it's likely that enterprises will be more willing than consumers to fork over higher rates for true 5G. While T-Mobile's Magenta unlimited 5G plans with no throttling and no data cap may keep it in first place with consumers, we're not seeing enterprise customers turning to T-Mobile as a first or second choice option for their employees' mobile wireless services. AT&T continues to lumber along behind T-Mobile and Verizon Wireless in 5G deployment. Most of AT&T's marquee 5G deployments have been limited to venues such as sports arenas. AT&T's crushing debt load is one factor that analysts predict will hamper its ability to build out its nationwide 5G network swiftly, even with its new C-band frequencies, which cost it almost $30 billion, including auction-related costs. That build-out will not be cheap. Even though C-band has superior propagation relative to higher frequency bands, carriers still need cell sites about every half mile with more density in crowded urban areas. That's a huge improvement over announced plans to build small cell sites in telephone poles or light posts spaced 1,000 feet apart in heavily populated areas, a daunting and expensive task. But realizing the full potential of 5G will require a great deal of engineering, maintenance, testing, and coordination, far more than is required for 4G.
Well, Kevin, I think we're still probably at least a year out from when enterprise customers should start shopping for 5G devices and negotiating 5G data plans for their employees. Today, I think there are at least 4 phones on the market that are C-band compatible. And I know that your research indicates that there will be at least 20 C-band compatible phones on the market by the end of the year. Okay, Kevin, well, it looks like we are out of time. As always, my friend, thank you for your insight. Now, be assured that we at LB3 and TC2 will continue to monitor the rollout of 5G and keep you posted on major developments. If you do want to talk about 5G or other ICT topics, Kevin and I and our colleagues, we are ready to help. You can also stay up to date by subscribing to Staying Connected, by checking out our websites, and by following us on LinkedIn.